couple weeks ago, well, I guess like a month ago now, the very surprising news dropped that Greta Gerwig would be writing and directing not just one, but two Narnia films for Netflix. Now, when I first heard this news, I said, that's not real. That's not happening. But it was confirmed shortly after by herself and multiple other outlets, so I guess that it is real. It's real news. It's happening. But, like, is it really happening? I think there's a very good chance these films never actually come out, and if they do come out, it's not going to be for several years, well, with all the strikes and just the nature of how long production takes and everything. But I really do hope that it happens, because as some of you may know from one of my previous videos, I love Narnia, I love the films, I love the novels, and I also really like Greta Gerwig. I think she's a phenomenal director, and I think personally that she is a great choice for this series. So I really hope that these films manage to overcome all the obstacles and the production hell that has plagued these adaptations for the past like 10 years or whatever, and that these films actually hit theaters or streaming services or whatever they're supposed to be. Greta Gerwig's filmography so far is like a perfect path leading up to Narnia. I think that the work she's done so far makes her a great candidate for the series, and a lot of people, myself included, are really excited to see what she's able to do with like the sibling love of the Pevensey children, and specifically Susan and Lucy. However, we don't really know what books she's adapting yet, and I think there's a pretty good chance that she'll go for something like The Magician's Nephew, and that to differentiate itself from the previous franchise, Netflix might try to have their series move chronologically instead of in publication order. Personally, I think publication order is the only right answer, but I can see why they would want to switch things up a little bit. And, you know, I'm down for whatever she manages to do, but I think it's just important to recognize we don't know exactly what story she's adapting yet, but that no matter which novel she chooses, or which two, I think she'll do a great job. So, why exactly do I think that Greta Gerwig is a great choice for this franchise? Well, I'm gonna tell you. Okay, so without getting lost too far in the weeds here, I'm not really going to say what I think the best way to approach the religious aspects of the text are. Everybody has their own opinion, and I'm not going to change it. However, I've seen a lot of people saying that Greta Gerwig is a poor choice because she doesn't understand religion, or she's not religious because she's made like liberal or woke movies or whatever, or hasn't had any religious elements to her works before. First of all, Greta Gerwig went to an all-girls Catholic school. She's very familiar with religion. C.S. Lewis wasn't Catholic. He was, I don't think, had a declared denomination, but he was very influenced by Tolkien, and Tolkien was Catholic. So, there you go. With that said, if you're smart or understand anything or willing to do any research, you're going to see that religion has impacted Greta Gerwig's works before, pretty extensively, in fact.
In the movie, it's like when it starts, she's in a world where there's no aging or death or pain or shame or self-consciousness, and then she suddenly becomes self-conscious, which that's a really old story. We know that story, and I think I kind of always go back to those older story forms because I don't know, I went to Catholic school and I resonate with them.
I also think that the most obvious piece of evidence here that Gerwig understands religion, or at least understands questioning where people come from and wanting to get in touch with a creator, which is very important to the story of Narnia, can be found in the final or the penultimate scene of Barbie, aka one of the best scenes in the whole film. At the end of the film, Barbie is talking to Ruth, the inventor of Barbie. It's her creator or her mother or whatever you want to. There's a lot of different ways you can look at it. But to me, having a person talking to their creator figure, asking what their purpose is and what they're made for, is a pretty basic element of Christianity. And we also see this same conversation many, many times throughout Narnia. There's tons of scenes where characters talk to Aslan, aka talk to God or their creator, about what they should do, about what the right path to take is, about what they were brought to Narnia for. Greta Gerwig literally has an Aslan scene in her Barbie movie. So I definitely have faith that she is going to maintain the spirit and the context of Aslan effectively, and there's no doubt in my mind that her understanding and relationship with religion is going to be used to great effect in the Narnia films.
Will you visit us in our world?
I shall be watching you, always.
In terms of her previous films, we have, again, Barbie and Little Women and Lady Bird. And I think that all three of these movies speak for themselves as to why she would be an effective director for Narnia, especially if you're looking at the Pevensies. But even beyond the Pevensies, most of the protagonists of Narnia are children or young adult to teenagers, and all of her films have focused on teenagers or young adults in some way. Lady Bird especially is about kind of teenage angst and questioning, which we see in the current or the past adaptations of Narnia with the characters of Edmund and Lucy. But that's an element that translates really well to characters like Caspian. Characters that run away from home or don't understand their parents or don't feel like their parents understand them are huge parts of Narnia, and that's also essentially what Lady Bird is about, the relationship between like a mother and her daughter. Then of course there's Little Women, which is an adaptation of a classic and beloved children's/family novel, as well as simply a great work of literature that focuses very heavily, some might say almost exclusively, on sibling relationships. There are even 4 siblings. I think there's a pretty clear... Makes a lot of sense. Then if we move on to Barbie, we have a story about a character who goes through a magical portal leading her from her world into another magical world, and she has to solve the problems in that one in order to understand her own and her own place and purpose in her own world. Again, that sounds a lot like Narnia. A lot, actually. In short, I think she's a lot better equipped for this franchise than most directors are for the franchises they're assigned. She's certainly more equipped for this and prepared for it than Andrew Adamson, who directed the first 2 films in the previous series. As much as I like those, he does not have a resume that I think would indicate he would direct those films successfully. His most notable cinematic achievements were Shrek and Shrek 2. And while yes, those are peak kino, very epic films, the rest of his filmography is rounded out by things that are not as notable, and I definitely don't think that Shrek, for as great as it is necessarily a spiritual precursor to Narnia in the same way that Lady Bird, Little Women, and Barbie can be made to be said to be to Narnia. So with all that said, I want to shift slightly to Greta Gerwig's style, because every good director has got a style. First of all, Gerwig's films are pretty, they're funny and lighthearted, yet manage to carry like huge emotional weight and deliver crushing emotional blows to the audience by countering the highs with lows, which is what you need to do in order to effectively move your audience. Not to mention that I imagine her husband, Noah Baumbach, would be involved in this in some way as well. At the very least, they're probably going to talk about it like at breakfast or whatever. And they're both extremely capable, smart, well-read writers and filmmakers. Noah Baumbach, as I mentioned in my last video, did an adaptation of White Noise by Don DeLillo, which is a very difficult family story to adapt and a very difficult novel to adapt, and yet he did it expertly. Narnia is very difficult to adapt. It's not unadaptable, but I think it is difficult to adapt. And I trust Greta Gerwig to do it by herself, but knowing that she works in such close proximity most of the time to Noah Baumbach as well, like I trust the two of them as a team to make this happen. So, since I've talked a lot about the art, it's also time just to talk about hard numbers, which unfortunately in Hollywood business you gotta do. But let's just be completely honest here. Greta Gerwig is a hot commodity. Like, she is going to bring people into this Narnia franchise. And a lot of you might be thinking that Narnia has plenty of fans already. It doesn't need any new ones. Yeah, Narnia has tons of fans. Like, I get it. I'm here, you're here. But let's stop being stupid. The average person is not dying to see a new Narnia film. This is not something that has the mass appeal of like a Percy Jackson. And I think that the average person, again, is not clamoring for a new and different Narnia adaptation. It probably doesn't occupy a whole lot of real estate in their head. Not to mention that being a major powerhouse currently, Greta Gerwig can attract massive talent. Like very talented, interesting actors who might not sign on to this type of franchise unless they're a dedicated director, auteur, whatever you want to call her, like Greta Gerwig involved. Greta Gerwig already has like a wonderful entourage of actors that include people like Timothée Chalamet. I mean, just for one. I imagine if she asked Margot Robbie to be in this movie, Margot Robbie would say yes. I can almost guarantee that anyone that Greta Gerwig has already worked with would be in this Narnia franchise with her, because why wouldn't you? Signing on to a Narnia franchise is also not like joining something such as Harry Potter or the MCU. You're not about to sign away 15 years of your life, because most characters in Narnia only appear in a couple texts. and only a couple texts at a time. So you're probably signing a contract for 1 to 2 films. Not to mention that by bringing in people like Timothée Chalamet or other similar talents, or again, just having a movie from the director of Lady Bird, I think you're going to get a lot of young people to see these movies, and you're going to get a lot of fans and kids interested in Narnia, and by kids I mean like teenagers, and also some children, who wouldn't have been interested in Narnia in the first place. And what might that have happen? What might be the result of that? What might they do next? They might read the books. Anytime you have new adaptations or new focus on something like this, new people, especially young people, are more likely to read the books. And assuming Gerwig does a good job, which I think she will, that is an absolute blessing. Another thing about this that I find interesting and optimistic is the similarities that this has to another very popular, successful franchise. So both Narnia and the Harry Potter series have 7 books. And the Harry Potter series is like the blueprint for adaptations, right? But what's interesting about the Harry Potter films, outside of their story and everything, is the manner in which they were directed. So the first 2 films were helmed by Christopher Columbus, a very capable, well-established director who had done a lot of great work, but maybe wasn't as well equipped for Harry Potter as Greta Gerwig is for Narnia, yet he still launched a billion-dollar franchise and did a phenomenal job doing it. Greta Gerwig coming on board for 2 films and then stepping away to let somebody else, climb on board the ship, sail, make their own movie, is just like Christopher Columbus stepping away, letting Alfonso Cuarón join for The Prisoner of Azkaban, which was a pretty smart decision for keeping that franchise fresh. This is definitely important for Narnia as well, because each book focuses largely on different characters and different time in Narnia's history. So I think that kind of having different voices and different directors step into this franchise after Gerwig gets the ball rolling could be really smart, as long as they manage to maintain a cohesive tone and feel to the franchise similar to the Harry Potter films. With all that said, there are some logical counterpoints, especially by comparing this to Harry Potter. The Harry Potter franchise is not without blemish.
My brother.
What the hell?
We might still be making the case that why do we need another Narnia adaptation? Aren't there other books that have never gotten anything? Aren't there some things that should just be left alone? Is this religious of a story really going to be palatable at this time? Can you please both people that love the text for its elements of Christianity and those who dislike the text because it's elements of Christianity? I don't know. These questions make me tired. I am just as sick of old franchises as the next person. The Harry Potter reboot is a perfect example of beating a horse that is already dead, that is already a skeleton. However, I don't think that Narnia is necessarily a dead horse quite yet. I think it is a difficult property. I think if they fumble this, it's toast. As a fan, the stakes of this are not that high to me. They're not as high as they probably would have been like 5 years ago, because at the end of the day, we've still got the books, and we still have what I think are 3 solid adaptations. And if you don't like the Disney films, you've got the BBC films, so there's something there. And we're always going to have the books. And I think that if people do remember Narnia, it is fondly because of those films or because of the books. With that said, something like The Dark Tower, I think, had tremendous stakes and completely blew it, because they had a great opportunity to induct so many new kids and people into reading, and they totally whiffed it. But with the Narnia franchise, I think the stakes are higher for Greta Gerwig's career than they are for us as fans, obviously. So that was a non-answer, but I understand the concern that we might not need another Narnia adaptation at this time. It's definitely not at the top of my list of movies that I would have asked for, but it's something that I'm interested in, and it's something that I think could genuinely be done well. The Harry Potter HBO series is something that I think is unwanted on every level, because I don't know that there's much left to say about those books. I think that Narnia can have a lot more to say. Other challenges, though, beyond simply managing to please all audience members with the religious aspects, is just pleasing people that are interested in a cohesive story. As I kind of mentioned, the order of these books is very hard to adapt, particularly if you're trying to differentiate yourself from the previous film franchise. You could also go for the approach where you mix them. You adapt them like comics and try to put elements from multiple books into multiple films. Is that the way I would do it or want to see it done? No, not really. But that's mostly just because I've been burned by, again, things like The Dark Tower. But I think that somebody smart like Greta Gerwig could potentially do it. And so we'll see. maybe she will. Or maybe, you know, she won't, but it's possible. And in terms of adapting the books, I honestly think that that structure is far more difficult than the religious aspects, because I think you can dedicate yourself to whatever part of the religious aspects you want, and if the audience is smart, can objectively recognize that shouldn't diminish the quality. However, I think that the structure and the emotional investment we have with the characters can definitely easily be screwed up and fumbled, and could be a huge detriment to the longevity of this franchise and also the success. This was really the case with the first attempt at adapting them, because after Voyage of the Dawn Treader, the franchise basically hits the soft reboot button, and the only returning character is Eustace Scrubb. Now, of course, Eustace Scrubb is the best character in the franchise, particularly when he's being played by Will Poulter. And I hope my boy, buff and handsome as he is now, gets to come back for the Greta Gerwig movies. But Eustace Scrubb is not the Pevensies. And after Eustace Scrubb, we hit hard reboot by going back in time, and the only recurring character is Aslan. So that's very difficult in terms of keeping audiences invested, and I don't envy them having to figure that out. And I wouldn't be surprised if Gerwig chose to do The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and Prince Caspian, and then X fell out, because she doesn't have to deal with the messy parts as much. But that remains to be seen, so we'll see. With all of that said or not said, my conclusion is that I'm really excited to see what Greta Gerwig can do. I think that her understanding of siblings and teenagers and femininity will lend itself really well to the story, particularly Lucy and Susan. And I think that she could have something very valuable also to lend to the Susan conversation, which is one of the most interesting and controversial parts of the texts. And I also think all the conversations her films have, again, about purpose, not just as men or women, but just as humans in general, are perfectly suited for Narnia, particularly in scenes such as when Barbie talks to Roof, and also during Joe's kind of meltdown at the end of Little Women.
You will be bored of him in 2 years. Just because my dreams are different than yours doesn't mean they're unimportant.
I think that is a perfect quote that applies to all 4 of the main Pevensies, and Prince Caspian, and every other character in Narnia. And I know some of you might disagree because of, again, how Susan is treated, but I think that at the very least, there's an interesting and nuanced and emotional conversation to be had there about those themes and about that character. And this is something that I really, really want to work and really want to happen. And if I had to choose somebody, a month ago it would not have been Greta Gerwig. She probably wouldn't have crossed my mind. But now that the idea has been thrown out there, absolutely, like, I'm behind it 100%, and there's not anyone else who I can think of who is more likely to do a better job. So let me know what you think in the comments, if you think Gerwig is a great choice, or if there's somebody else you'd be interested in. If there's somebody else you'd be interested in, I mean, you're wrong, but it's okay. No, you're not wrong. But I feel Greta Gerwig would be a good choice, but I'm interested to see what other people think, what they want to see from a new Narnia adaptation, and what they don't want to see, what their hopes and what their fears are, or what you think the best way to adapt the books are, whether it be publication order, chronological, or a mixture of both. So thank you for watching. Let me know what you think, and I will see you guys next time when I make another video. So in the meantime, bye-bye.